Formerly an aerospace engineer, Allie Boone is now a lifestyle entrepreneur, business consultant, and real estate investor. She left her 9-to-5 to pursue her ultimate freedom, being able to work wherever she wants, whenever she wants. Her ultimate goal is to someday challenge Tim Ferris to a lifestyle design duel. So with these lofty goals, ambition, and inspiration, Allie, thank you so much for reaching out, getting on the show, and spending some time today with us.
Well, thank you. Huge thanks to you for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation. We've already kind of been talking a little bit, and I'm so stoked to see where all we go with this. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. So you have an awesome story just from the back of the baseball card there, so to say. But could you dip into that a little bit deeper and tell everybody kind of like how you got into real estate, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So real estate was a total accident. Kind of going backwards, I became a pilot first. That was kind of my first, sort of professional thing. And I was doing flight instruction through grad school, and I was working on an aerospace engineering degree. Finished that, this was this whole, like, what I should be doing and where's the paycheck, and it's the 9-to-5 hustle kind of thing. So I got that degree, and I was all excited to get hired on with a very elite company. It was just like what most people would consider the dream. And I'll never forget the day I walked into my very first gig. So here I am in nice outfits, when not really my thing. And I'm walking through these cubicles, and I turn the corner to my new cubicle. And I'll never forget that moment when I looked in there and I was like, uh-oh. Like, I knew I didn't even have to sit in the chair. I was like, this is terrible. It was instant. I was like, oh wow, I just went through a lot of school for this. But so I knew I had to get out, and it actually took me, I worked that job for about 5 years, or worked for that company for about 5 years, the whole time trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? And, I started reading books. The internet was there, but I wasn't a big online resource type, and it wasn't as big as it is now. So I was reading like hard copy books, like one after another. And the conclusion I came to is that the only way out of a job was going to be to either start my own business or get into real estate investing somehow. I didn't know what that looked like, but those seemed to be the two kind of predominant ways to get out of a regular job. And, I was researching and going to all the like Rich Dad weekend seminars and like anything you could imagine. And at some point I knew I was going to have to pick one of those things, like business or real estate, because I was learning too many things across the board. So I decided to start a business. I didn't know what it was going to be, but while I was pondering that, a couple of weeks later, I got this random real estate investing webinar for a particular opportunity. And because I was bored at my job, I watched it. And long story short, I ended up pursuing that deal because I was thinking in my head, well, it'll be great once I get out of this corporate job, but right now I have a W-2 and a decent paycheck, so I could at least be doing something smart with my money. So I started investing on the side, and the network connections that I kind of made through that, and one person led to another, and all these things happened where I ended up working with these people. And at the time, it was kind of a side gig on top of my corporate job. I was like, oh well, good side money. And then finally I woke up one day and I was like, wait a minute, this is my business. So ironically, after thinking I had to either start a business or get into real estate investing, I started a real estate investing business. And that was now I left my corporate job almost 7.5 years ago. And so ever since then, my first year doing it, I told people I had never been more broke, but I had never been more happy, because now I shifted into what I felt like I was supposed to be doing. It was very challenging. Now I was on the entrepreneurship roller coaster mentally. Hang on to your hats. It's different, and it's hard, and it's challenging, but it was so much more rewarding. And so fast forward 7.5 years, a lot of what I do now is looking back on starting as an entrepreneur, but also in the real estate side. I'm focused a lot on passive income, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And really what I've loved doing with all of this is really looking at how things are structured. Because my goal was never to work more or work harder. I wanted to be more free. So it's like, how do you take the workload of entrepreneurship and be more free at the same time? And I got to the point where, immediately I was sleeping in. Sleeping in is one of my biggest joys in the world, and I do it. And, and then traveling when I want to and all that. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now, is just kind of playing that field. I can still make a mean spreadsheet, but I left engineering. So, I brought the numbers skills with me, I think, a little bit, but otherwise, peace out.
I love that. That reminds me of a book I was just jamming on, talking to my CEO with, called The Surrender Experiment. where you kind of
Oh,
send,
that's one of my Bibles. How'd you know?
is it really?
Oh yeah, it's on my bookshelf right back there, and I've read through it twice already. And I was already thinking I was due. If I could grab mine. I'm surprised. Like when I first read that book, I literally want to just like hold it and sleep with it. I was like that book, and I feel like I'm due to read it a third time because I don't know if you do this with books, but like I feel like every time I read it, I pick up something different. Like when I started reading that book, I was in one place. And so then I kind of got a little further along and then I read it again and it kind of helped take me to the next place. Oh my God, that's so great. No one has ever mentioned that book on a real estate podcast that I've done. So
Yeah,
that's super cool.
100%. And what's the saying? It's like you never cross the same river twice. You never
Yeah.
step in the same river twice, because anytime you reread a book, watch a movie, listen to a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, listen to a YouTube educational video, you're a different person at that time.
Yeah.
So it's like
Well, the
always,
only exception to that might be because I've watched Top Gun, I don't know, probably in the ballpark of 400 something times. I'm pretty much the same person now every time I see it, but
that's funny. I love that movie. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff to unpack from there. I'm excited to have a convo
Mm-hmm.
with Allie for you guys. This is about as 80-20 time freedom as it gets here with Allie. But I brought up the surrender experiment because just kind of going through your journey there, I'm going to pick out a few nuggets to deep dive on. But one of the very first things that came to mind was you kind of had that intention of how you wanted life to be, kind of how you wanted business to be. And you kind of
Yeah.
just surrendered to the fact of like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to start a business. And then you ended up having a real estate business. Now you have,
Yeah.
success. You have a book coming out that's in the works, which we'll touch on. And most importantly, you put your happiness before success. And really,
Totally.
as I think I've always been innately like that as a person, which I'm blessed and grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
But I just see it more and more, and I'm fully locked in and proactive on telling people that happiness really comes before success. And
Yeah.
you're really living that.
Yeah, and I like what you said about like because what I did, I tell people all the time, I've always had an entrepreneur brain, like I'm always coming up with different ideas and whatever. And I've told people since I started this company that before that I had like 173 business ideas and only one of them worked. And the difference between my company now that worked versus the other 172 brainiac ideas I had is that it was really about like I set my intention first. I knew I wanted freedom. I knew I would get happiness with freedom. Everyone equates happiness to whatever, but my happiness is tied to my freedom. I wanted freedom. I wanted out of the job, but I never knew how that was going to happen. Whereas with all the other ideas I had, I would come up with the idea and I'm like, okay. I remember one time, I think it was probably my first year of the corporate job. I was like, okay, what can I do? And I was like, my family, to some degree, had owned a hotel in Texas. And I was like, okay, well, we have hotel ownership in our family, so I'll buy a hotel in Atlanta and then I'll run it. Like, yeah, that'll like those were the things I was coming up with. And so like what I learned, at least from my experience, and I know people who succeed doing it the opposite way, but for me it was more of like, what am I trying to accomplish? And pursuing that and kind of letting the answers come to me, because people are like, well, how'd you find real estate? And I say, I hesitate to say it fell in my lap because I worked really hard to allow it to fall into my lap, but it kind of fell in my lap. Like I didn't have a specific intention for it to end up being real estate, but that's what came because I kept pursuing what it was that I was trying to achieve. If that makes any sense, is like,
Totally.
to this day, I don't know the end goal of my company. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what the cap is going to be. Whereas everything else, I kind of created the end first and tried to work backwards to make it happen. So this was, like I never knew, especially in the beginning days of the company, I never knew how this was going to work. And so all I figured out I could do was the best I could do every single day and kind of see how that ends up building on top of each other. So, just kind of I say all that to say like, it's so much about your intention and figuring out, we talk about mindset, but figuring out what it is you're really wanting, because people think, oh, well, I want to flip houses or I want to wholesale or I want to own rental properties. Well, that's not what you really want. Like, what do you want that those will supposedly get you? And so if you kind of take the time to backtrack a little bit and be like, okay, wait, what is it I'm actually trying to accomplish? Then you're going to set yourself up better to make sure that everything you're choosing to do is actually going to fit that. And, because the famous story of like, flipping properties or wholesaling or whatever, it was like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And then they're working so daggum hard that they didn't get anything that they, were hoping that they would get out of doing that. So, I'm sure we'll talk lots about mindset, but that's kind of where that was. And, for anyone who's considering any kind of business structure, whether it's real estate or whatever you're doing, letting the pieces really come to you versus feeling like you have to create the whole picture. Plus that takes pressure off to not have to figure all that out in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And your brain is constantly analyzing double-digit thousands of potential opportunities or things that may be coming at you, but really having a deep intention set. And I feel like a lot of people might just have more of a general intention of, I want to have a wholesaling business that it's eventually going to lead me to financial freedom with real estate assets. But I don't think that's nearly as deep as what you would recommend looking back at your younger self, or even with some of your business students, your business consulting students. So what's some advice as far as setting intentions? Like what type of areas would you go? Because obviously we have like feelings of like freedom, abundance, some type of numerical. You want to see how many expenses that you have in your business's overhead, you and your family's expenses, cost of living, everything like that. But talk to me a little bit about, let's first go to that first level of like setting an end intention and reverse engineering and being able to reverse engineer that.
Ooh, reverse engineering. I like it because I have an engineering degree.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're going to reverse it. Hey, I think that's kind of what I've done in my life. Get the engineering degree and then reverse it back out. I don't tell this to a lot of people, but I actually ended up, so that was a master's degree in aerospace engineering, and I ended up getting a second master's degree in spiritual psychology. And
my God.
I started the program just because I thought it'd be funny to say I had master's degrees in both of those, but exactly to what you're saying, that's kind of exactly what that degree was, is I got that engineering degree, and then the next one I got completely reverse engineered. I'm going to actually write that down. So the thing with intentions, I think there's two main parts about it. Number one is a freakish level of self-honesty. So many people, like, I'll be the first to tell you, I love sleeping in. And, that's kind of and I don't sleep till like 2 p.m. like a teenager, but like I wake up when my body wants to wake up. And, if you say like, oh, I sleep in to anyone over the age of like, I don't know, 25, they're gonna be like, oh, what a slacker. There's like a stigma around sleeping in.
Yeah, it's the social conditioning.
So it's like I have to be honest about that. Like that is truly one of my greatest joys in life, is knowing that I can wake up when my body just wants to wake up, and ignoring everybody who's going to poo-poo that. So, whatever your intention is, whatever you want, like intention should be based on what it is you really want, and don't be filtered about that. Like even if people are going to judge you or whatever you think they're going to, like whatever, but you have to be honest about it, because if you're it's like going to a therapist and lying to the therapist. It's like, what's the point? Like, why even bother going? So self-honesty is a huge thing, which does involve some self-awareness, because you may not have been in a position to even think that you have those options. Like it's not an overnight thing. Like it might be something you ponder for a while. It's like, what is it I really want? Because maybe you've been busy with family or kids or jobs or whatever it is, and you just haven't had an opportunity to really think about that. So self-awareness and self-honesty is the first part. And then I think the second part is really allowing yourself to believe certain things are possible. So when I, like the life I've been living for the last 7 years, I could travel when I want, I could sleep in when I want. I basically have structured my life however it is I want. And I'm not going to say I don't do a lot of work, but I don't have to show up at a property, for example, and tend to running toilets or whatever. Like I can go play on the beach, or if a friend says, hey, do you want to do lunch? I have that freedom. So mine's freedom based, but like a lot of people don't realize that the level of freedom that I've had for the last 7 years is even possible. So, like when I work in some other projects completely outside of real estate and business, where we actually teach intention setting. And when you set intentions, we tell them like it only has to be 50% believable. Like it can't be like, I want to go live on the moon. I mean, I guess that's partially believable, but like, so it's 50% believable. So it's obtainable, but you want to allow yourself for more than you realize is possible, because there's so much available that people do not realize is an option. So those are the big things: self-awareness and honesty, and opening your mind to what's really possible. Because it'd be easy to say, oh, well, I have a family and kids, I can never have that life, I can't travel when I want. Well, you could, like not saying it's going to be super easy to get there, but allowing yourself to believe what's possible and be open to what you don't know is possible.
100%. And you're, like we said before we started recording, or started the episode, I should say, like we're birds of a feather. because I believe all in the same exact thing. Awareness is the first step, and it's such a huge first step. It's like the foundation of everything. Belief is a huge second layer to that. Without believing it's possible, and really like goals and things that you set up are really just belief in efforts of reverse engineering it and putting into small chunks, really, because that's really like the manifestation of a belief there.
I
So
can
that's
actually
awesome
give
stuff.
I can give a concrete example of this too, is that,
Sure.
you know, when I said I wanted to leave my corporate job. So that was obviously my first thing. I didn't know what that looked like. And I knew I wanted excessive amounts of freedom. That was really all I knew. And so I hung tight to that intention. I was like reading everything about passive income, like how can I obtain those things? And eventually I met, so actually this real estate opportunity that got me started with all this, I had the contract for the project, and one of the key players of it said, you know, oh, hey, you're in LA. I'm also in LA. If you want to come over, we can go through the contract, meet each other, whatever. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I show up at this contract, like super redlined. I was like, I'm going to prove this is a scam. Like, yeah, I'm going to show him how smart I am. But so I get in front of this guy. We have met on a rooftop pool deck in a high rise in downtown LA. He shows up, and I wasn't in like a suit or anything, but like, you know, I had notebooks and like you would show up to some kind of work meeting or whatever. He was wearing a polo shirt, khaki shorts, flip-flops, no briefcase, no laptop, no notebook, super chill. And it turned out that he had just gotten back from traveling to, I don't know what country, but he had been gone for a while. And this is like a Tuesday. And the whole time, you know, we're supposed to be talking about this real estate contract, and I was just looking at him and I was like, what's happening here? Like, I need to, like, forget the contract. Like, I need to know how you're on a rooftop pool deck in khaki shorts and flip-flops, and you just traveled out of the country and you run your own schedule. Like, that was the part. So he ended up cluing me in to his lifestyle and how he how he structured that. So that ended up, he became my mentor, and that's how I ended up structuring my company exactly like he did, so I could achieve the exact same things. So I say that to say I didn't know what that freedom looked like. I just knew I wanted it, and all of a sudden I met this guy who like gave me visual proof of what this freedom can look like. And so that kind of led me down the journey of how to structure that. So again, that goes back to that belief of like, hang on to that belief, even if you don't know how it's going to happen. But if you want it, like, hang on to that, because it'll work itself out. It'll present itself, but you just have to, you know, don't toss it out saying, oh, that'll never be possible. So
Yeah, and coincidentally and ironically enough, guys, from you listening to this podcast and getting social proof, you're building belief that you can establish passive income and get freedom in your life too. As funny or ironic as that sounds, it's really what you're doing. So I really tried to immerse myself in other podcasts too. Right now, we're almost in March, and my two favorite podcasts of 2020 are Mark Evans' Making of a DM and Tim Brott's Legacy Wealth podcast. Both of those I listen to for about 5% or less strategical mechanical advice on real estate, and 95% of it is mindset, belief. Mark Evans talks about like having massive success. He has like 16 businesses. A handful of those are doing 8 figures a year, and he only works a handful of hours. I should say now he has a book. I think it's the 10-Minute Business Owner, but I love immersing myself in his podcast because he's all about similar stuff that Allie's talking about on an extremely high level of where he's making a ton of money, doesn't have to work again. He has generational wealth. Same with Tim. So I'm doing that myself, guys. For those of you who follow the show for a long time, Q1 of 2020, I've been full immersion. Mark Evans' podcast. I'd like to do a review of his podcast because I've been enjoying it so much. But from you guys hearing Allie's story and listening in the future, this is kind of, you're in this first step area, gaining belief, strategy, everything like that. Let's touch a little bit. So you got this mentor, chill dude on the rooftop deck. I really admire how he chooses
to live his life. I love flip-flops.
I wear flip-flops every single day. I have Nike basketball. I have Nike slides. I wear like every single day different Nike basketball slides.
I'm in slipper socks right now, so
love that. But tell me, I guess let's go down kind of like the numbers of the corporate, the corporate kind of discussion of, you got this mentor, and like what type of real estate do you have now, and what kind of returns are you getting those before we go full on to mindset stuff?
Well, so I'll kind of, before diving into the details, I'll kind of explain what I ended up getting involved in. That
Definitely.
very first opportunity was something completely different. It was a pre-construction deal. Funny enough, in a third world country, I love doing anything
Hmm.
that'll ruffle someone's feathers. That actually ended up flunking out. The developer, famous developer story, ran off with the money. We've never seen it since. But fortunately, what that allowed me to do was meet all of these other folks. And so what I ended up getting involved in was turnkey rental properties. And, I know this is more of a wholesaler kind of based podcast. So I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but you've probably heard the term.
Hmm.
And the term turnkey refers technically to the condition of a property. So it would mean that the property is freshly or fully rehabbed, tenants are in the property and paying rent, and in most cases that you'd have property management set up to manage the property for you. So the whole idea is that all you have to do is stick the key in the door, turn it, and you're making cash flow on day one. So the reason I got involved in these properties prior to this, when I was doing all this research of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I was researching, I was going around with agents and looking at properties in California and like, do I rehab? Do I flip? Do I wholesale? The question that everybody's asking in the beginning of which strategy do I do? And one of the things that held me out of doing a lot of those, well, I should say out of like flipping, for example, or even finding distressed properties, period, for myself, was the idea of negotiating deals or finding motivated sellers, negotiating deals, rehabbing. Like, you don't want to see me with a hammer. It is so poor. Like, it's terrible. And so all of the things that were involved in that, it's like, I have an engineering degree, for God's sakes. Like, I'm smart. I could figure these things out, but like, I don't like those things. Like, I don't want to do them. They're not my strengths. But at the time I was thinking that I had to do them because that was how you get into real estate. And so I kind of held off and held off. In the meantime, these turnkey rental properties show up and I was like, you mean all of that stuff I didn't want to do is done for me? And I was like, now we can talk. And so I ended up getting involved in those because I just don't want to be hands-on on my properties. And there's some pitfalls to turnkeys, and every strategy has its pros and cons, but
Sure.
for me it was about as passive an income as it could be for owning actual property. Like, if you do notes or syndications or something, it's super passive, but to actually own properties, this was about as hands off as I was ever going to get, which was kind of my jam because I wanted to focus on other things. I didn't want to be focusing on chasing toilets and
Hmm.
tenants and all that kind of stuff. And so I started, when I still had my corporate job, I started buying turnkey rental properties for myself. And then so suddenly everybody and this was back in 2011, 2012. So this is like in the midst of the crash. Things were on sale. I don't even know that I want to tell you the numbers I got on some of these properties because it's not even like, people now are like, oh, well, what cap rates or cash on cash did you get on your properties? I'm like, you don't want to know. Like, it's not even available now. Like, I can certainly tell them to you, but so I started buying, right before everything was about to boom again, like specifically in Atlanta. Atlanta crashed hard and we all saw this boom coming. So I scooped up a whole bunch of properties there. And sure enough, now they're all worth double and triple the value from when I bought them. And so while all this is going on, I was so stinking excited about it. I was like, oh my God, I'm buying these things. And everyone's like, what are you buying exactly? Like, they knew I wasn't swinging hammers. They knew I wasn't doing anything. So at one point, like, my cousin ended up buying a property. My mom's friend ended up buying a property because everyone's asking me, like, what are you doing? And so that actually that became my business, is the website Bigger Pockets took me on as a writer. And suddenly everybody wanted to know about these turnkeys. And so my whole business since day one has been helping people buy turnkey rental properties. And parts of that equation are so when I say turnkeys, I'm talking about properties that come from turnkey providers. So there's companies who are working with the wholesalers. They're essentially flippers, but they work with wholesalers. They work with whatever means to get the properties. They do the rehabbing. They place the tenants. They have property management set up. And I'm working with those people, but also then helping. I'm not working with them as much. I'm more on the buyer side, but like, what's the buying process? How do you identify a turnkey you want? How do you know you're working with a good turnkey provider?
Hmm.
How do you close on that deal? And what happens if a challenge comes up afterwards? Like, that's really where I fit in. So that was going on for quite a while. And about a year and a half ago, so this whole time, like, my Bigger Pockets articles, everything I was preaching was passive income, don't landlord a property yourself, don't rehab, all that. So me and some partners ended up buying a property pretty local to me here in Venice Beach, and it was not a turnkey. it wasn't in bad shape, but it needed a little bit of work. And suddenly I was a landlord managing the handymen myself and contractors and whatever. And truly, it proved everything I've ever said to myself about why I hate doing those things. Truly, like, I can't tell you when we first bought that property how many times I did not get to sleep in because I had to go meet a handyman. I was like, and even now, like, I still landlord this property, and it's a great property, and it's more high end. Like, I'm not even slumlording. And, you know, occasionally, like, dealing with handymen is a total thorn in my side. And,
Mhm.
you know, just constantly keeping up with that kind of stuff. So all of that to say, to kind of explain what it is that I actually work with. So I still focus, except for this property, I still focus primarily on turnkeys for my business. When I write, it's about passive income, mindset, lifestyle design, all that kind of stuff, systems, structuring type of things. But so I have all the turnkeys and then this local property. And I was about to say something else and I completely forgot it. So
It happens.
I'm like, well, there.
Especially when you're former aerospace engineer turned writer, lifestyle design, turnkey expert, you know, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a ton of fascinating stuff and definitely a unique guest here that definitely is right up my alley mindset wise. But it definitely seems like you have an emphasis on like your approach or specifically what the different assets or avenues of what you're doing in your career. It's like you're not necessarily saying like, hey, do XYZ what I'm doing.
Right.
Find out what you want at the end of the day, which we were just talking
Yeah.
about with intention and, you know, having the belief, the awareness, everything like that, and kind of go down your own
Mm-hmm.
alley. Cause you just kind of, no pun intended, going down your own alley. But you kind of just got these things placed here. And I don't know, it's just interesting how you're explaining how you went through that.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, a challenging thing in real estate investing for anyone who has even started to dive into the industry is most of us didn't learn this in school. I don't know if maybe they're teaching it to the younger people now. I don't know, but most of us didn't learn this. And so you're like, okay, I want to be a real estate investor. And you dive in and there's so much information. And the one thing I feel like people don't tell you is the I don't want to say repercussions, but like there's a million different strategies in the industry and they all involve different risk levels, skill levels, effort levels, and they all accomplish different goals. And so what I feel like people don't really spend a lot of time because they're like, oh, go flip this house, or oh, the best way to start is with wholesaling, or if you get a rental property you definitely want to landlord it yourself because of these reasons. You know, I feel like so many people in the industry are telling you what you should be doing, and it's like, how do they know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I truly, and that's, I think that's one challenge that a lot of people have getting in this industry. There's a huge failure rate. And I think it's because like someone says, oh, I should flip a property. I'm like, oh, I should flip a property. That goes so far against my strengths. Like turnkeys are and if I were to pick which strength I had, I would not pick rental properties. It takes forever to scale those. I'm like, you know, like I didn't choose this, but rental properties are my jam. Like they are my strong suit. I'm really good at them. And sure, I could go try and flip or wholesale and get some bigger money faster, but I'd be swimming upstream. And so it's like, you know, I have people come to me and they're like, oh, I think I want to buy a turnkey. I'm like, okay, tell me about your situation. I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I don't think a turnkey's for you. Like, no. And so exactly what you say, I actually appreciate you saying that because that's my intention. And I'm glad that it's kind of coming forward is like, I want everyone doing, because there is few worse feelings in this world than feeling terrible about yourself. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you go try and be a flipper or a wholesaler or whatever, and it's not your thing, you're going to end up feeling terrible about yourself. It's like, you know, kind of like, I mean, this could be a whole other tangent, but like, I feel bad for teenagers with social media these days because, like, you get an Instagram overnight success. And I've heard stories of teenagers who are like, well, why can't I do that? Like they feel terrible about themselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I really want people to think about like, work to your strengths because that's what you're here for. We all have different strengths. They're all going to complement each other, like, and enjoy the journey. So that's why, you know, if you're ever not enjoying the journey or whatever, like take a step back and yeah, I could go on a whole mindset tangent. Like
Mm-hmm.
I could probably go on for hours if you let me, but yeah, I think it's so important that's why I say take that step back and really figure out what it is you want and what you
Yeah.
enjoy. Like, you know, we get so tied up in the numbers and everything else. Like, you should still be sleeping good at night. Like I say, no matter how high the returns on a property, it's not worth it if you're not sleeping at night, period. End of story. So, you know, happiness, not over, it's a stressful industry regardless, but it should be like a fun stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but just, really, I don't want to sound all like lovey-dovey about it, but like put some love back into the equation.
Yeah.
Primarily for
No,
yourself. Like just don't go down a road that you're going to end up feeling terrible about yourself for.
yeah. No, you're preaching to the choir. And I mean, when I'm kind of talking to it with high level entrepreneurs, or kind of like discussing my same theory about that, like making sure like your mental game is strong and you're happy and
Hmm.
fulfilled, everything like that. If you do want to put like a revenue number behind it, if you kind of like take a step back and look at like your whole year and you see 365 days, if you're able to operate, 300 of those days, say in theory you're working every day at least a little bit,
Hmm.
300 of those days you're just happy, buzzing, can work as many hours as you want. Some people, like we were saying
Yep.
before got on there, like if you're happy working 18 hours a day and grinding, like good for you.
Right
But just
on.
imagine most of those days you're looking at an annual calendar, and 300 of those days you are just like feeling limitless, happy, fulfilled, everything like that.
Hmm.
The compound effect of all the actions that you're going to take, the creativity you're going to have in your decisions, the extra little bit of like networking you might do, everything, the value you might provide out in the network is just
Hmm.
an absolute game changer. Then
Yeah.
even if you did like 250, or on the low end, like, like 50, 25 days, if you're more so on like the other end of the spectrum of not enjoying life being fulfilled. So like it is such an 80-20 lever to put an
Yeah.
emphasis on that.
And keep in mind when you do it that way, the energy that you exude is going to be obvious by everyone around you. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to wholesale and let's say you're completely swimming upstream and you're just like, ugh, you're only having like 50 or 100 days a year where you feel all those good things and you're just like bogged down, people are going to sense that. Like you're not going to get more deals. Like, but when you really get into your jam, when you're spending 300 days a year in that limitless like excitement and joy and whatever, regardless of the stress levels, that is going to snowball and compound your success ultimately, because it's
Mm-hmm.
so much easier to float down the river than try and swim upstream. That's going to be um, it's going to come out in your numbers at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. So it's not even just like let's make sure we stay happy in all of this. Well, you're probably doing this for money, so just realizing that mindset too will contribute positively to the money as well.
Mm-hmm. And just in one specific asset that's coming, or instinct, or avenue that's coming to mind, guys, is even with like your hiring and the team that you're managing. So a
Yeah.
lot of people are listening to this show. They're probably a CEO or operator. They probably have a team anywhere from 2 people, them and a virtual assistant, to maybe upwards of like 10 people with acquisitions, dispositions, transaction coordinator, maybe some other ancillary pieces that are in their business. So I would challenge yourself to think about having that mindset and putting an emphasis on you, the operator, just running at an extremely high mental level,
Hmm.
because that when you have hiring, you should always be looking at hiring anyways, or looking at bringing on new talent in your team. And I'll talk to Ali about that here after
Hmm.
this. But just the energy that you exude to your team, confidence, everything like that,
Yeah.
huge ripple effect for everybody that you deal with on your team, who your team deals with as far as sellers, buyers, anybody in that whole process of building your team is absolutely amazing. Um, Before we go full mindset, happiness advantage, surrender experiment, Ali, I do want to talk about some 80-20 levers that you have in throughout your businesses, as far as like systems, processes, hiring. What's been
Mm,
like your biggest successes, failures, learning experiences that you can go down
totally.
in that avenue?
Um, Ooh, I love entrepreneurship conversations. Real estate's cool and all, but entrepreneurship's really where it's at. I would
Mm-hmm.
say one of my biggest successes, especially because you were just kind of talking about it, is my hiring. So I have hired some of the worst accidentally, lost money over it, and it's like, ooh, okay. But my core team has been with me. I've been in business for 7.5 years. I mean, they've been with me now for I don't know, 6 or 7 of those years. And what I kind of to what you were talking about and kind of what we've been talking about in general, the one thing that I really acknowledge myself for in my core team is number one, if you hear any of us talk, it is very rare that it'll ever sound like I'm the boss and they're the employee. Like we really just communicate. Like occasionally I may have to put my foot down about something, but it's so rare. And I can't remember what it was you said about like, working with your team and having and really exuding that kind of energy. Like I talk to them like they are equal human beings to me. I'm not talking down on them. Like I'm like this is not a manager, employee, senior manager, corporate structure. I hated that structure. It's like, okay, so you're more experienced. Like I don't know, it's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to my employees just like you and I are talking right now. And so taking out that distinction, because what that allows, I think, is for everyone to kind of feel like they're contributing to the bigger picture. Like, yes, I'm the boss, but they're part of the team. They're not just working for me. And the one thing I love about my core team, I can honestly say that all of us, and myself included in this team, are all working to our strengths, period. So like, if you ever message me on the website, you're probably going to hear back from Melissa. Melissa handles our whole database, our emails. The things she does with our client database, I'm baffled. I don't even know how to operate it. I cringe thinking if she were to ever leave me, like, but it's not my strength or my interest, and it is hers. I have a girl who helps me with marketing kind of stuff, and all of the projects she helps me with, she's fantastic at them. She enjoys them. She's good at them. I hate them, like hate them. I'm like, you do it. and then, if I name off all of my core people, they are all literally only doing the things that they're really good at and that they enjoy. And what that and me the same, like the marketing thing and the email database and the setting up email blasts and all that stuff. Again, I'm smart enough, I could figure it out, but it's not my thing, and I would start hating life. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not my thing. So we've kind of dispersed all that. And what that's allowed is, first of all, I don't have to be constantly doing things that I despise, but when we're all working to our strengths, it's like the whole level of what we accomplish just rises exponentially, because if everyone's just kind of doing a specific job, they're just going to get that job done. But the ideas start flowing. Like the marketing girl will be like, hey, have you thought about this? I'm like, woo. We're able to kind of like build the bricks of the foundation so much easier and more smoothly, all the while everyone's happy. So and I treat them just like I'm not just like my friends. We don't have a friend relationship as much, but it's kind of a friendly type of thing. Like, I try and give them bonuses at Christmas. Like, I want them to want to stay with me. And so, because if they leave me, like, that's going to be so much headache on me. And I genuinely
Mm-hmm.
really like them as people. So how can I make that happen? I can cultivate this, culture and interaction, like allow them to enjoy what they're doing and not try and put some kind of job task on them that they're going to hate. And so that's I think one of my biggest successes that I've been pretty good at from the get-go, is really getting those phenomenal team members in place. Again, a little trial and error a few times, but for the most part, that's been a huge success. And I would say um, the biggest challenge that I've been made aware of more recently is a lot of people, when they get into entrepreneurship or real estate or whatever it is, they really hesitate to spend money on new attempts at business or whatever it is. I actually was the opposite. I'm more of a like, throw the spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks, let's do it, because I don't want to like sit and try and figure out what's going to work. So I would throw all the spaghetti. And what I am now kind of backtracking and revising that mindset on about is I need to be much more intentional about the spaghetti. And so, like, instead of throwing a whole pot of spaghetti, which costs me money, and hoping something sticks, like, get a little more intentional in the sense of, like, what am I assuming I'm going to accomplish by putting money into this particular effort, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just throwing it to the wall and hoping it sticks. So that way, it's kind of me kind of reeling myself back in and not spending so much money on, I mean, props to me for trying, but like really kind of reeling that in, because, and this is true for real estate, business, whatever, is like, wholesaling, for example. Everyone's going to tell you the things you need, and I don't wholesale, so I don't know all these things, like the mailers and the this and maybe like a client database and blah blah blah. Well, cool, but like not putting the cart before the horse. Like, be
Mm-hmm.
intentional and be specific, because in a way, aside from saving you potential money loss, it's also a little bit of a kind of like a business plan in your head of like, okay, so they say I need this client database. Do I don't know. Okay, what's it going to accomplish? And so it kind of helps you sift through and figure out like, what is it trying to help me accomplish, and what am I going to do? How does that fit into the bigger piece of the puzzle?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big learning more recently for me, is really just kind of, okay, pause on the spaghetti. Let's get intentional. What I'm finding from that is that I'm getting much more pointed and direct about the efforts that I'm trying to make to, support my business and do everything, versus like just throwing it off to the wind, which, again, props to me for doing that, because a lot of people won't even spend a penny. And so I kind of had the reverse problem. So
Totally. A couple takeaways from the success side that I want to share. One is, in theory, if you lived hundreds of years and you had the time, you could probably be successful in all the different tasks and positions in a real estate business if you really did, and you didn't have to worry about mental exhaustion. The only issue with that is our time on earth is very finite, and we don't have that time, and we have a limited amount of mental exhaustion every day, every week, depending on sleep, same thing, happiness level, everything like that. So it is really important to figure out your strengths, what you're good at, and what you enjoy doing. Find something that is, kind of like falls into the Venn diagram area, something that covers over both. And then the challenges, one thing that I took out is kind of like the advice Allie gave at this beginning of the episode of kind of being intentional what you want. But even her own advice to herself right now is like for her to even take that a little bit to a deeper level. So she has all the different types of pasta in there. She's going to be a little more selective. If it's rigatoni or angel hair, what she's actually going to pick out of there.
Oh, I love angel
and
hair.
Throw against the wear. Same. I know I could go for some.
And bow tie.
Yeah, everything. throw some chicken parm on top. I'd love all of that. But that's kind of what I was picking up from her. The one thing from her success, and the one thing that she has challenges with, those two things. And it's funny that it's kind of like the same advice that she would give to her younger self, what helped her, except to a deeper level now. Yeah. Which makes sense. That's life.
Yeah. If it doesn't put you two off track, I would love to kind of go back to this hiring people thing real quick. Because as you were talking something, the whole kind of premise of what we're talking about is freedom and lifestyle design, or, like really structuring things to meet your goals. As far as this hiring, because I know you tell people like you have to hire people. There's no way around this. And I know from the entrepreneur side and real estate, but essentially in this kind of conversation, real estate investing, regardless of whether you have an actual like business from it, it operates the same as entrepreneurship. You are essentially an entrepreneur because you have to make your own thing happen. And so, a lot of people hesitate to hire people. And I get it. First of all, it's a skill in itself to learn how to hire people. Like I said, I learned the hard way how not to do it a couple times. But one thing to think about, what I did with my company is that in the very beginning, I think it's really important to think of the balance of not hiring people too soon, but then not waiting forever either. And so what that looks like for me was I started doing everything myself. And as it came up, I started identifying the things that were holding me back. Like this, emailing, for example, because I was writing for Bigger Pockets, I had, from the minute I woke up in the morning to the minute I went to bed, and I go to bed really late, I was getting emails. Like I was literally spending 100% of my day emailing people back. It was exhausting because it had too much. And I woke up one day and I was like, I'm not getting anything done. And these people weren't buying real estate from me. That was one of my problems, is I love talking to people. So here I am talking to everyone for free. And all the while I didn't have time to build my business. I was like, okay, I need help with this. And this is a task that somebody could help me with. So that's when I went out and found Melissa. And then the next big one was, and this is my favorite example of why hiring people is important. The next one was, I had been doing the website myself. And as you and I talked about before the show, technology is not my stronger suit. At all. But, I wish I had screenshots of this old website. It was so bad in hindsight. At the time I was like, cool website. And it wasn't. So here I am with this website. And I had randomly started talking to a web guy. It was a virtual assistant. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I had kind of been introduced to this guy. I hadn't really worked with him. So a Friday afternoon, some kind of hitch with the website came up. I don't remember what it was. And I was like, I'm an engineer. I'm going to figure it out. 7 hours later, and this was not a big problem. 7 hours later, I still had not figured this thing out. It's a Friday afternoon. I could have been doing a million other things. And so I sent a message to this guy thinking, well, I could at least just inquire. I was not thinking anything of it. He fixed it in, I don't remember, I have it written down somewhere, like 6 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that. And at the time, I think it was, maybe 3 minutes he fixed it. And at the time, his rate was like $12 an hour. It cost me literally like a couple dollars to have this problem fixed in under 5 minutes that I had just spent 7 hours of my life trying to do. You know what I could have done for my business in 7 hours? And that was that first, that was the biggest aha moment about outsourcing. Is so many of us, most of us getting into entrepreneurship or real estate or whatever, we have a control freak side to us because we're smart people. Like we know how we want things done, and we think we're the only ones who can really do them and all this kind of stuff. Well, that was my first aha of like, oh, I just spent let's say my value of my time was $100 an hour at the time. I just spent $700 not doing something else to give him like $12 or whatever it was, less than that. And so then I realized I needed a web guy. So I kind of did it as I needed it kind of stuff, versus, because if you hire people too soon, you're not going to know exactly what tasks you really need people to do. And then if you wait too long, you're going to continuously spend 7-hour blocks working something that someone could have done for you in 30 minutes. And then bringing that all forward to what I was saying earlier about what I consider to be a success with my team is that everyone's working to their strengths. Here's the big part that I feel like people don't realize is we want to hang on to our jobs so hard because we know we're going to do it the best and we care the most and all that. But like I said, so many of their tasks are not my strong suits. The email database, the mailing, technology, the marketing. I'm so bad at those things that while it's easy for us to think that we're going to accomplish more to a better level doing it ourselves, it's not true at all, because what they're able to accomplish doing what they're really good at, like marketing, emails, mailing lists, all that kind of stuff, ultimately the quality, our website, I toot my own horn, I think our website is awesome. It never would have been like that if they had left me in charge of it. End of story. So it's this, this is a mindset thing of reversing what we think to be true, which we think everything's going to be the best it can be if we're in charge and we're doing it all because we care the most. I think that is 100% inaccurate, where if everyone is doing what they're good at, that goes back to that whole raising the level of everything. So I hope that's helpful for, again, outsourcing is pertinent to anything you're doing, wholesaling, real estate, business. Shoot, your life. Like I'm not going to be my own dentist. Like I'm just going to go hire a dentist. It's way more cost effective. So hopefully that helps, offer a little bit of guidance on that outsourcing thing. Cause it is a confusing topic sometimes. And a lot of people don't really know how to navigate that one.
No, 100% helpful. And my roommates would probably be annoyed at like how happy I am that I just hired like a cleaning service for my bedroom and bathroom for the first time. I cannot tell you how happy I was just for this principle Allie's talking about of I was working for like 2 hours and having my room and bathroom, which is pretty big, just completely professionally cleaned while I was like working for 2.5 hours. Was so happy. As far as the, it's 100% a mindset as far as the outsourcing. And that's something I'm not like master level by any means now. And this is a big project for me. Q1 going into Q2 is more so outsourcing different things for the podcast, like making content clips, things like that. So it's a muscle I'm very much working on. I think the ability to outsource, even if whether you're better or something not better at something than someone else or not. So it could, depending on what your skill strength is, it's kind of, it's going to be mental obstacles that you're going to have to overcome and build a mental muscle for. It's kind of like being able to outsource that and hand it off is kind of like in Top Gun when someone, when Tom Cruise or Maverick requests to buzz the tower and they tell him, they say, negative Ghost Rider, the pattern is full.
You just coded Top Gun.
You still have to buzz the tower anyway and outsource, outsource those tasks. And I think the best filter for you guys, if any of you guys are in our academy or follow us pretty closely, one of the first things that we do is doing like an exhaustive task list. So I think having an idea of what your value is worth, like take maybe how much revenue that you have coming in or your salary, whatever it may be, whatever you're currently working on and how you get compensated, kind of like divide that. One thing I like to do is like divide that by the total hours, like get an hourly idea of how much you're worth in your
Yeah.
career. And then kind of you can use that as kind of like holding that up against any task that may present itself that you have to do. And then like Allie said, like with that example, she was paying, $700 at the time if she was doing 7 hours of work at that time, valuing herself at $100 an hour, which I'm sure is like 10x at this point. But that's a great filter and just some like tangible advice I could give you guys too that's been helpful for me, and it seems like for Allie as well.
Yeah, it's totally true. And and something to remember is that we're all kind of we all start kind of in a I can't think of the word right now. I need another coffee. But we've grown up in a society that tells us we should be everything. That we should be able to do, that you hear about this like with women sometimes, like they're supposed to be the mom and work full time and smile. Like there was a comedian that had a whole blurb on that. Like they tell us we're supposed to be doing everything. I don't want to do everything. It's like, and there's this like people are trying to empower everyone saying, oh, you can do it all. You can have it all. Well, and they also, our society also makes you feel terrible if you can't do it all. And so realizing that most of us have that in our heads and we grew up with that thing where you've got to break free of that because you can't do everything. End of story, period. So if you can't do everything, you might as well focus on the things you're good at and you enjoy because, I'll offer kind of a quick little nug that you didn't ask for. So in this book, we talked about that I'm trying to get. So another one of my severe weak points is getting a book out. I have this book. So if anyone watching knows how to get a book out, I'll take the help. But I have this whole chapter in there where I have decided for myself, and then now I tell other people about it. I've decided there's 3 currencies. Money, we all know, that's an obvious one. But the 2 that people don't talk about are time and sanity. And so in any situation, no matter what you're doing, in order to get something, you're going to pay with one or more of those currencies. So in my case, like if I want to preserve my sanity and my time, I may have to pay a lot more money for, honestly, this is where turnkeys fit in. You're going to pay more money for a turnkey, but in return, in theory, you should save on the time and sanity component. Somebody who likes working on their own property and they're good at it, they can go buy a distressed property and rehab it and pay way less money for it, and they're just going to give up their time. They may not even give up sanity. They just may, do some of their time. So I look at everything in my life and I'm like, okay, what am I paying with it for? What am I paying with for it? And for me, what is my most important currency? And for me, I've decided all day long, it's sanity. So sanity for me is worth way more than money and time. Like I don't mind spending my time. If I have to spend the money on it, cool. But sanity is critical for me. And what contributes to my sanity may not be what contributes to your sanity. Like I said, I can't flip a house, but maybe you can. So me trying to flip a house, I would lose sanity. You may not. So, it's if you take these 3 things into consideration for everything you're doing, you are going to pay in 1 or 2 of them at least. So figure out which one is more important to you and pay with the others. You know what I mean? So kind of falls in line with what we're talking about, but 100%. Money, time, and sanity. Everything we do is going to involve those 3 things.
100%. Well said, and amazing way to tie that to, like an asset and strategy in real estate. I did interview a guy in LA. Do you know Antoine Martel by any chance?
He actually, I think he lives about half a mile I haven't met him in LA, but we've talked a little bit, and he's down in Marina Del Rey and I'm in Venice.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I interviewed his team reached out. I interviewed him roughly 6 months ago, give or take. And he does turnkeys as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting just cause he sent some deals my way, and it's pretty much, you're pretty much putting anywhere from like 15 to 25 grand down on like a down payment. And then you're pretty much netting anywhere from like 250 to, it was like 350, $400. But you're pretty much, that's what Allie's talked about with like the 3 different type of currencies. Like you're putting just a down payment on something, but then you're pretty much having the property is being managed by Antoine or Allie's team. I don't know if that's the case with yours as well, but yeah, it's interesting looking at it that way. And then you breaking down kind of the 3 currencies between time, sanity, and money.
Yeah, and with the turnkey example, a lot of the people who have beef with turnkeys who don't want any part of them is because you're going to pay about market value for a turnkey with no real way to force appreciation, like no real way to improve it to force appreciation pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So, you are paying more money for a turnkey, but so people are like, oh, well, I don't want to buy that. I want to buy the distressed property. Well, cool, but you're going to save on the money. But as soon as you start saving on the money, you're going to start spending at least in time, and then depending on your preferences, sanity or not. But you can pay, if I pay $100,000 for a turnkey and you get a distressed property for $60,000, that sounds like a huge win. But what do you have to do with that property at that point? And especially me, me and Antoine are in LA, so we can't buy cash flowing properties here, so we have to buy out of state. So in our cases, if I'm going to buy an out of state property, if I'm going to pay $60,000 instead of $100,000, well, cool. That almost sounds like a win until you start considering, now I have to rehab, which I'm already terrible at. I can tell you all sorts of stories about how terrible I am at that. Behind me is the world's most expensive bookshelves, and that's a story for another time. So I'm already terrible at rehabbing, and then to manage a rehab from out of state, and then so there's all these components. Everyone's like, "Oh, I want the $60,000 house." Again, cool, but money's not the only currency we're talking about here. Like risk level increases dramatically, skill level increases dramatically, effort and time level increases dramatically. And for the people that are good at that stuff and enjoy it, right on. But so again, that's a perfect example of Antoine talking about turnkeys. Is that, again, people want to forget about this time and sanity currency and think it's all about the money, and that's a very common thing in real estate investing. It's like, no, the money. Well, no, that's not how that works, because there's going to be a trade-off, and you need to make sure that you understand where that trade-off is going to be and make sure it falls into what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Amazing. I love how you're breaking that down. One question I have more so on the strategic side, or just like pros cons of getting into turnkeys. How often do you see it? I know you haven't been in business necessarily like 15, 30 years yet,
Right.
where a mortgage may be paid off on one of the turnkeys that like your end consumer would be purchasing.
Right.
But what's kind of like your opinion on long-term property management if you were to buy a turnkey? Just when I was like talking with Antoine about a couple of deals in those markets like Memphis, Cleveland, where I would
Right.
just pay like that $15,000 to $25,000 down payment, and then I'm pretty much hands off. Talking a
Right.
little bit about that as far as like pros and cons and the deal, and like it's because it's a little bit of like a trust factor, and like almost like the quote, faith is going step by step, only seeing one step at a time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious on like the maintenance of a property for 30 years until the mortgage is paid off, property
Right.
management for that long, everything like that. So I'd love to hear your 2 cents on it.
So a couple of things come to mind. One, a shorter kind of piece of information is obviously when you buy a turnkey, turnkey is only a method of buying. Once you own the
Mm-hmm.
property, it's just like owning any other rental property. So your exit strategy options are all the same. Excuse me. I got all excited. I'm like, oh boy, choke myself. Your exit strategy options are all the same. So you can hang on to it forever, which is kind of what I'm planning on doing with mine, because I got them all so cheap, and they've, I don't see a reason. I wouldn't be able to find cash flow higher somewhere. So you can hang on to it forever. You can whatever you want to do with it. But one thing about turnkeys that some people keep in mind, because you mentioned maintenance and all that, is that a lot of strategies have you calculating for Capex, capital expenditures. So the big things, the
Mm-hmm.
roof, the plumbing, the big ticket items that you at some point as a property owner are going to have to replace. And so in addition to allocating cash estimates for repairs, is this Capex consideration. What happens when the roof goes out? How much is that going to cost you, and whatever. There is a strategy with some turnkey people where, because the property is fully rehabbed, and hopefully if you've done it right, you've gotten a property inspection to verify the condition of all the potential Capex items among everything else, they may want to sell the property in 7 years before the Capex items start going. So if all the Capex items start going at, say, the 10-year mark or something, they may sell at 7, so they're out of it before they have to worry about that kind of stuff. So that's one thing about the long term in regards to like maintenance and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also why when you're looking at turnkey properties, you're not going to see a Capex. You'll see like the expense list, so regular expenses, but also an estimated allocation for repairs and vacancy, because that's a reality of any rental property. Most of the time, you're not going to see a Capex allocation for that exact reason, as people it shouldn't happen. If everything goes right, it shouldn't happen for a long time. A bigger answer to what you're asking, and probably the biggest experience that I've had, is with the property management. If anyone has ever dealt with property management, you know how terrible it is. Truly, it is the weak point oftentimes of any equation. And with property management being such a big point with turnkeys, I would argue that of the entire turnkey thing, property management is the weak link. And so one thing that, people don't realize, turkeys oftentimes bring in brand new investors, and so they don't have the experience to they're advertised as hands-off properties. So people are like, ooh, hands off, I don't need my brain attached to my shoulders, and they just kind of assume everything should be taken care of for them, which it should happen that way, but sometimes it doesn't. And the property management, like, I would never put this label on it, but as the owner of the property, you are the boss. The property manager is essentially your employee. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, if that property manager is not performing, it will cost you a fortune. Like, aside from some people will try and nickel and dime you out of repair costs, if they place a bad tenant, the deadliest costs I've had on my properties are bad tenants. And so if they place a bad tenant, if they, if they're just falling short on management, it will cost you as the investor a fortune. So I think the number one most important thing is, once you buy this turnkey property or any rental property that you have property management on, is keeping an eyeball on those property managers. And I'd say one of the most expensive mistakes I've made over the years since I started buying my turnkeys is not firing bad managers sooner, because I'm super gullible. Like, I think it's one of my best assets, because I'm the one who's like, oh, I can travel the world and sleep in every day. I'm so gullible. I believe it. But that worked out well on that side. But, like rehabbing, like, I get taken all day long. But, so the property manager things start kind of falling short and whatever. And I'm like, hey guys, like, I need you to step it up. And they're like, yeah, we totally will. Well, I'm gullible. I stuck with it too long. And the minute, I can say historically now, every time that first conversation's happened, it's never gotten better. Like, I should have been firing them right then, like, you're out. And it's kind of like that whole red flag thing. The minute the red flags come in, get out. Make sure that they actually are red flags. Don't jump the gun too fast. But, really staying on top of the management. So your job, if you have a rental property and a property manager is managing that property, you have now shifted into this position where your job is to manage the manager. Whereas if you're the landlord on the property, you are managing the tenants, the property, the toilets, you're managing those things. But shifting out of this position, now you're in this, like, if you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all that, it's the difference between being an employee and being a business owner. The employee is going to deal with all the nitty gritty stuff. I'm sure, given the books we've talked about, you've read the E-Myth Revisited.
Yep, Michael Gerber.
Like, that's my business Bible. Surrender Experiment, Life Bible, E-Myth Revisited, Business Bible. But I don't remember if it's a cupcake or a cookie shop or whatever it is, but there's a big difference between baking the cookies and running a cookie business. And so same thing with a rental property is, if you're landlording the property, your skill set has to be in the tenant management, the property management, the repair management, yada, yada, yada. If you now have property managers, they get to deal with all that stuff. That's the stuff I hate. I'm like, you deal with it. You meet the contractor at 8 a.m. because I don't want to. But my job now is to manage the manager. So this is back to business owner type of feel. This is the same as entrepreneurship and outsourcing. I don't need to understand how they do their job, which is a big misnomer. People are like, oh, I should landlord my property first before I hire a property manager so I know what they're supposed to be doing. I think that's hogwash. What am I, 85? But
malarkey.
like, why is that the word that came to my head? Hogwash, I tell you. But I'm now managing the manager. And so that is, as far as the long term of the turnkeys, that is really solely your job. I would say that is probably 95% of the job, because all the small stuff is going to get taken care of for you by them. At most, you might have to make decisions about, like, maybe you improve the property later. Maybe there's some decision you have to make on the property, but 95% of your job is keeping up with that property manager. And that's what you're going to deal with long term, is just making sure they're still performing. So, and it's not super desirable. I prefer not to have to worry about it. But if I compare that to my other options of doing it all myself and showing up at 8 a.m. to fix a toilet, I'll take that all day long.
100%. No, it was a great way that you broke it down there. Um, and just hearing some, some questions from me on Turnkey, where you're really choosing what you're doing at the end of the day as far as exit strategy.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to more so end on, or a couple piece item here. I want to hear about the book. I know it's a working
Yeah.
title. I don't know if you want me to say it. I know you're still
Sure.
molding it. And then the not your how-to guide to real estate investing.
Yep. I'm pretty sure, despite popular advice, I'm going to stick with it because I really
Love
like
that.
it. And I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
like this.
accurate.
Yeah. Do you? I like to zig when other people zag, and I like to do what I want to do.
And I've
So
never
I
really
love
listened
that.
to people very well anyway, so I don't know why I'd suddenly start now.
Yeah. Don't change your ways now. But I want to hear all about that book, any resources that you have for the listeners, and then I want to hear about your lifestyle design challenge with author of the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferris.
I had to actually do I had to create a pitch for myself last year at a conference, which was not my skill set also. I feel like you guys are getting like where my skills are not. I am very vocal about what my skills are not, because if anyone ever wants to help me with them, rock on. So in this pitch, I actually said my goal is to publicly challenge Tim Ferris to a lifestyle design duel. And I actually came up with that, and I was dead serious about it too, because I love what he teaches, and his kind of lifestyle that was my thing. I've chilled out a little bit in the past year or so. Like I kind of hang a little more chill now, but I was traveling all over the place, and going and getting master's degrees in spiritual psychology because it was fun, so yeah, that I would not be opposed to that still happening, as I'd love to, come face to face with Tim Ferris and see who can win that battle. So my book, which I was saying before the recording, I swear it's done. I just don't have I was saying it during the recording, actually. Any book people out there? It's called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing: Life Lessons on Hacking Your Mind Before You Hack Your Wallet. And the whole idea behind it is, I swear that there's no how-to guide in the world that's going to help you if you don't go into it with the right mindset. And being that we're talking about real estate investing is all how-to guides. I mean, that is what everyone's screaming about, like, oh, you do it this way and this, and then you're even asking, how do I do it? What's the step-by-step procedure? Like, that's what most of the conversations are based on, how do I do this thing? Well, cool. But that goes back to my whole thing of like, what we're not talking about is, should you be doing that thing? Or maybe you should be doing this thing. Or what about that? Like, you're going to do this thing, but your goal is this. Those don't really fit, so it's this mindset thing. So I know I was just like everyone else, where I knew nothing about real estate investing, but I started diving in. I was researching everything. And I was like, I should buy a hotel. Okay. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's the big thing. And and how-to guides were coming at me from every different direction. But fortunately, I was able to kind of pause and be like, something about that one doesn't really fit. And so it's this whole idea, and the book is more passive income related, but the idea of is to really give you different things to think about that a lot of people aren't talking about. Like I talk about leveraging, for example, both leveraging people and resources and whatever, but leveraging on properties. So should you finance a property or pay all cash? And what, people hear basic reasons why you should do either, but nobody really breaks it down all that easy. So there's that. There's the chapter on the 3 currencies, where you're paying with something: money, time, or sanity. I said earlier, there's a chapter called Stop Managing Your Own Shit. And for it goes back to the outsourcing idea, like, stop trying to do everything yourself. And there's a chapter about your strengths and weaknesses, and that whole conversation of like, people say you're supposed to strengthen your weaknesses, but in fact, if I try and strengthen I even put a little clever bar graph in there. Like, if I try and strengthen a weakness of mine, I'm going to improve it, but I can only go so high with it. Whereas if I strengthen a strength, I mean, the sky's the limit for me. So it's that whole thing of just things to consider. Even if passive income ends up not being your thing, you can at least say that you have thought through those things, and more concretely what it is, that you actually want to do and what makes sense. And then the whole last part, ironically, is a little bit of a how-to guide. It's really just basic steps. Like, if you're starting at ground zero and you want into real estate investing, what should you do? And like, I basically outlined the exact course that I did. Is the first one, I don't know what I called it, but like, research everything. Like, just get all the information you can, and then what? Then start like, it's the most basic, kind of like an organic way to end up getting to where I did, where turnkeys and rental properties came to me because I kind of followed this process of like, I figured out, or it was presented to me, what was going to match what it was I was trying to do. So there's secretly a little how-to guide in there. And then it actually finishes with some interviews of real-time investors in different fields. So we've got a wholesaler, we have me as the turnkey person, flipping high-end rental properties, and we break down like, what are your actual job task? Like, what things do you have to do to accomplish this? What skills are imperative for you to succeed? How does your business look different today than it did when you first started? To really try and help people get an understanding of what do these strategies really look like. Because when everyone gives you the how-to guys, like, oh man, I'm going to be this really cool flipper or wholesaler and I'm going to make so much money. But like, no one explains what that life actually looks like. And, so that's kind of I say all this, maybe if I talk about my book publicly, it'll force me to actually get it
Definitely.
out.
It's a forcing factor. It's a forcing factor.
Yeah, if I just keep talking about it, someone's going to hold me accountable. But yeah, hopefully that should actually be out pretty soon. Yeah, for sure. And so I also, completely aside from the book, you talked about where people can find me. So I actually set up a link for just your people. And it is, so my company's name is Hipster Investments. Ironically, I'm not even close to being a hipster, but it works. So if you go to hipsterinvestments.com/8020 for this podcast name, you will, so I know you guys are more wholesalers and not so much into the turnkey space, but I do have a Turnkey Rental Properties 101 ebook that normally we charge $14.99 for, but it's free for you on there. So you can go get that for free. I mean, again, even if you're not a turnkey person, you might learn something from it. And especially if you guys are wholesalers, you might be wholesaling to turnkey providers. So, it may not be that far off from what you guys focus on. And on that page, again, hipsterinvestments.com/8020, you can get links to, my email, my social accounts. I run a Turnkeys Facebook group, all that kind of stuff. So, and I tell people, I love talking to people. So if you want to reach out, say hi, even if we aren't even in the same arenas in real estate, like, I'm totally down for it.
Love it. I don't know how to end it, guys. It's just a plethora of knowledge here. And even that last segment Allie was going through, it's like, you can listen to that and take some perspective that'll help you no matter what type of exit strategy in real estate you're doing, what type of entrepreneur you are, if you're an entrepreneur. A lot of great stuff there. So genuinely appreciate how you choose to live your life. Obviously, it's funny, like I would say like 80% of the interviews I do are like people that I already know, and probably 20 are like people that I don't know. And we were like laughing before we went out, even went on air, just with all the similarities in mindset and books and stuff like that. So it was awesome to get to know you, and hope you guys enjoyed the episode. What's the best social media for you to follow you and reach out?
I'm pretty equally terrible at all of it.
Okay.
I actually just got on Facebook.
Too.
Oh, sweet. I just got on Facebook for the first time about a year ago. Like, I was, I don't know, 14 years late to that game. My favorite is Instagram.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm like, oh boy, that's such a bad question. I'm equally bad at all of them, but Facebook and Instagram both. I have my personal one, which the links are in that website I gave you.
Okay, cool.
And then Hipster has their own also. So Hipster Investments, I think most of the handles are like Hipster Invest, and then mine. So yeah, reach out on any of them or follow whatever, but definitely connect, and especially Facebook. I post on Facebook. It's not as much real estate stuff, but like I said, I have my Turnkeys Facebook group, which is actually doing really well. First of all, I had no Facebook experience, and I had no thought that this group was going to take off, but it has turned into an awesome group. I think we're up to almost 700 members now, and people are posting all the time. So it's really cool, but definitely connect with me, friend me. And let me know if I can ever be of help for whatever.
Yeah. The growth in that group is similar to Michael Singer and Surrender Experiment. Didn't know it was going to happen. Just had a lot of stuff going on, attract a lot of people, ripple effect. Well, awesome, guys. I'll make sure to put that link in the show notes so you can see everything Allie. I'll throw in the some of the books we were talking about as well too. We'll be making a blog post here, which I'm excited about, something new that we'll be doing for every episode. So reach out to Allie, say what's up, and appreciate you guys choosing to spend your time listening to this episode. Have a great day.